Andrew Hebard here with the Ahi Flower channel, Regenerative Omegas for a Regenerative Planet. And today my guest is Seleyn Deyarus, a real thought leader in the whole area of regeneration. I'm so pleased that Seleyn could be with us today. Seleyn, I met you, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago at the Regenerative Earth Summit, where you introduced me to regenerative agriculture, and that had a profound effect on me. I'm a trained agriculturalist and a farmer. So thank you for that. And it had a profound effect on my business as well. And I said that you're a true thought leader in regeneration. You were the founder of Regenerative Rising and then ran the organization as the executive director, and have now moved to a role as board member for Regenerative Rising, which, if I understand it, is a not-for-profit organization seeking to educate and inspire people about adopting regenerative practices to try to offset some of the non-regenerative things that we as a species seem to be doing to our planet. Would that be a fair summary?
Yes, it's really, I think I would add that we're really aiming to help change the very foundation of how we think. Because as Einstein famously says, you can't solve problems with the same thinking that created those problems. And as we all know, the conditions that we're collectively facing globally as a planet, as a species, are mostly caused by an approach to how we have set ourselves up on this planet with a little bit of a, shall we say, a bit of selfish disregard of all other lives that we share this planet with. And a indigenous living systems perspective or worldview is what Regenerative Rising really seeks to elevate and help make more understood and experienced.
Great. Well, with that in mind, so that's a great segue into, as you know, my company, Nature's Crops, we're trying to grow products and process products for healthier people, healthier planet. And we fall within the natural products industry, the global natural products industry. So what can we do as an industry to ensure a sustainable or even better, a regenerative future for us and those that come after us?
I don't think we have enough time for that whole conversation.
Yeah, but give us the clip notes.
Yes. But, I think it really does start with, the types of questions that we're asking. Are we asking questions from a more holistic lens so that we're opening up for, the problem solving side of things to stay inside this full systems consideration? And what I mean by that is we are all trained in mechanistic thinking. Since the Cartesian evolution, this has dominated thought in the Western world. We look at things as breaking them down into their parts. We make a lot of decisions based on that breakdown of things into parts. And ultimately, there are a lot of unintended consequences that occur because of that kind of approach, because we aren't thinking about things from a living systems perspective. Mechanistic thinking is fabulous for designing a factory. It is terrible for thinking about living systems and ecosystems and the human body and the human form and our shared well-being, because we're living life and we have lots of interdependencies that a mechanistic frame completely doesn't observe or include.
So what would your advice be then for a company like ours to sort of encompass that and say, okay, so this is what you're doing? Because it's difficult to make wholesale changes overnight to a business, obviously.
Absolutely.
And we've got to think about this as maybe incremental changes and incremental mindfulness to this. What would your advice be to me to say, bear this in mind, incorporate this into your mission statement?
I think the first thing is to always ask, who are your shareholders, your stakeholders in your context? So you have land and water and air and all the living beings that occupy those spaces that are part of your context for doing what you do. And then you have the people in your organization and their well-being. And are they diverse? Are they receiving, the best possible kind of right livelihood opportunity to be developing themselves as people inside of an organization? And are their best efforts and energies and essences really what they're bringing to the workplace, as opposed to kind of fitting inside of a description, as opposed to aligning a business environment to the strengths of the people and what they really can, best offer. So to me, it includes that whole framework of what's good for the land, what's good for the water, what's good for the people.
Great. So it's funny you say that. As I hear you say that, I'm thinking that's what we just went through to get B Corp certification. And it really is. It's about identifying all of your stakeholders, farmers, stewards of the land, obviously staff, and an inclusive and diversified workforce are so important. And the other thing I consider our stakeholders things like bees.
Yes.
We have to have pollinators for our crops, and our stakeholders being a plant-based omega business. We're also thinking about, the wellness of oceans and the marine ecosystems that go with that. So well stated, and we do try to incorporate that into our mission and our core values.
So good on you for doing that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I appreciate that that you've gone through the B Corp certification process, because that's a really powerful 360 view of the governance, as you mentioned, and all these other facets, that what constitutes an enterprise that's striving to fire on all these multiple cylinders, which is a mechanistic thing that I just said. But nevertheless, how do we create that more broad lens for how you're doing what you do?
Yeah, and it's a great starting point. It's not like, oh, we've got it, we're done. It's like we've got it, and now the journey begins. So
that's right, and they require that. I mean, that's part of the requirement, is you can't sit still. You've got to keep improving.
Continuous improvement, yeah. So as I mentioned at the outset, two things that made me really look forward to our call today. The first one was you introducing me to regenerative agriculture and the concept of regenerative agriculture and how we then applied that to our business. And the other one is that, as I started out by saying, we have called this channel the Ahiflower channel Regenerative Omegas for a Regenerative Planet, because we see all of these things, as you said, interconnected systems. What we do on the land and how the food that we eat, the nutrition that we take in, has direct and indirect consequences further down the line. And for us with Omega Nutrition, it's about the consequence on the oceans, as well as our human health, about fish stocks and making sure our oceans are vibrant and sort of well-populated places for bigger organisms than ourselves to live in. So
right on.
What impact do you think regenerative agriculture can have? What impact is it having today, but what impact could it have in the future? Because 4 years ago, regenerative agriculture was new to me. I know you've lived and breathed it for years, but it was new to me, and I try to keep my ear to the ground of these things. Now it's gaining momentum. There's an awareness of it. I wouldn't say it's quite ubiquitous, but it's gaining great momentum. What could that look like in the future for us in our systems mindset rather than our mechanistic mindset?
Well, if you think about how we occupy space and time as a species, we are pervasive. We are everywhere. And if we want to create a more regenerative context for, the shared well-being of all other life on this planet, including ourselves, regenerative agriculture, interestingly, has a phenomenal role to play in that. Because as you know, if you create an aim for soil health enhancement, then you have to start relating to soil and land differently than a conventional approach. You're bringing external inputs should be declining while you're amplifying natural ways to enhance the soil organic matter and the amount of microactivity in your soil and your soil biome. And that means reintroducing biodiversity of plants and biodiversity in the landscape. The ultimate best strategy for how regenerative agriculture can change our current way of producing food is that it's integrated food systems. You have land that has crops, but you also have animals that are moving through that landscape and doing their natural role of soil disturbance, of adding nutrients to the soil through their waste systems. And when you look at how, especially when we think about, grasslands, which a lot of grasslands is another imperiled ecosystem, like the oceans on this planet, it's in sharp decline. But it gives us a profound kind of window into how the life systems evolved on this planet and in these intricate, interrelated web of life where you have, the ungulate that passes through, you have all sorts of diverse plant life that coexists in a balanced way to create the nutrients that different plants in that ecosystem require. So there's this collaboration going on, and regenerative agriculture has the opportunity to reimagine itself and, move away from monoculture planting, create co-planting, create more animals integrated into the landscape, get them out of these horrible CAFOs, these confining environments that are absolutely disrespectful. Regenerative also has an opportunity to help reinvigorate us around what is a more indigenous perspective of our relatedness to everything. Everything is a relative. We have an innate connection to the vibrancy of forests, the vibrancy of grasslands, and the vibrancy of all of our waterways. And our well-being is intricately woven in all of those things. And we're at this tipping point where it's very much in our face. But the challenge is, what do you do with that? Because we're entrenched in very long-standing systems, which is why we're having this conversation, right? Is to sort of say, hey, the old way of doing things, the way we're all indoctrinated, has to be disrupted. If we want to have, a much more beatific shared reality. Imagine, green cities where you've got different kinds of living structures that are integrated that make us healthier and happier, the air more vibrant, having ecosystems that are, again, much more alive than they are right now.
So that's so well spoken. So you've got I'm sure you've got these statistics. I don't, but I read somewhere that agriculture is responsible for about a third of greenhouse gas emissions. And I think it's second only to the global transport industry and fossil fuels third.
It's third, and it's actually the apparel industry that's number two.
Oh, okay. So two things that really strike me about adopting this regenerative mindset. First of all, is that looking at it from a climate and global point of view, obviously carbon capture, carbon sequestration is a key component of that, and regenerative farming plays a big role in that as well. And the other thing is that I think over the 40 years I've been involved in agriculture, gosh, isn't that a sober and horrible thought?
No.
I've seen some consumer trends and awareness, like non-GMO, like organic, and I shouldn't call them trends, but an awareness and a movement. And what I really like about regenerative agriculture is that it isn't a pass or fail system. It's a continuous improvement system. And it's, of all the systems I've seen, it's the one that integrates the consumer with the farmer and the processor collectively, because they all suddenly see themselves as stakeholders. Organic and non-GMO, not so much, but I think with regenerative agriculture, we're seeing it now that people are starting to understand what it means and how important it is to be a custodian of the land and that sort of thing. So you started something, or you're at the forefront of something that is being really, really impactful. So kudos to you. I salute your efforts in that area. The next area I wanted to transition to, Seleyn, as I mentioned, what really at the heart of my motivation, my passion for ahi flower and regenerative omegas is the damage that I see being done to the oceans. It's my happy place to be on the water, and it takes a little bit away from me each time. I'm seeing less and less vibrancy and just vitality in our oceans and what we're doing. So, finding something that can genuinely replace fish oil and deliver the essential nutrient requirements that fish oil can, we feel very proud about that. What are your observations from somebody looking into our industry at the effect and the sort of crisis we're facing on our marine ecosystems?
It's extraordinary when you stop to think about it. I was looking at some stats that in 1990, 90% of fish stocks were within biologically sustainable levels. And now, and then in 2017, only 65.8% of fish stocks were within sustainable levels. And what's interesting to me about that is that also coincides with the elevation of the message to people that we needed omegas for health, for brain health. And so it's no accident to me to look at when we tell the human species, this is really good for you, then everybody runs to that side of the boat. And then everything gets tilted out of kilter. But that to me is partly the problem, along with just the population, the growth in consumption of fish proteins has also jumped. Aquaculture has jumped considerably. I think it's like over a 500% increase in the amount of global aquaculture, well, I can't even say that word, aquaculture production in the world. So, it's a combination of desperation on the part of folks trying to make a living, which I have deep empathy for. And then it's also an obsession with our own personal health without deep consideration of larger impacts, which is back to that mechanistic framework. You're only thinking in one column of reality as opposed to thinking about the whole. So the fact that you have spent the time and effort to be searching for an option that's a plant-based option to meet that need for human health, which is a real need. We don't generate these things biologically. We have to consume them. Is hugely significant to me. And I've told you before, I just have such deep appreciation that this, from your personal intention, that you really worked very diligently to find a plant source. And here's this unusual thing that most people have never heard of that can grow in a cultivated system and provide this kind of nutrition. It's really extraordinary. So I think it's a very hopeful thing. And it's how, obviously you're asking this question too, how do we bring this forward into the larger marketplace? How do we get this transition from dependency on, it is a renewable, but it's an overtaxed renewable system in our oceans? And how do we bring this towards a regeneratively grown plant source for omegas?
Yeah. And you know what's we're still on we're day one of a lifetime journey, understanding more about what we're trying to do and be better. And I don't think for a minute that we are we're anywhere close to sort of being a few miles down the road on our journey. But we're learning so much as we go along, and regenerative agriculture is one of them. But the other one is that we're starting to sort of see, and this may sound a little bit cynical, which it really isn't. But if there's one thing that humans have gravitated towards, as you say, we go to one side of the boat, is that if a little of something is good for you, a lot of it must be better. and yes. We kind of, we then overdo things, and we load up on things. And what I think we're seeing with the omega industry, as you say, they're essential nutrients for our bodies. We've got to have them. We don't make them ourselves. But if we take in the building blocks, we can make everything that we need to from it. But what we've done is we've rather used the poor old fish as a corrective source, sort of almost like the pharmaceutical corrective cure for a lifetime of maybe making not the best decisions about diet and nutrition and wellness.
Absolutely.
And, so it comes back to that's the mission that we're on, about regenerative health and wellness, regenerative planet, that through better decision making, better nutrition, better agriculture, better production systems, we don't need to actually go to the sort of cure mindset. We go to the avoidance mindset, the putting in place good systems to avoid having these issues in the first place.
Well, it's interesting when I think about the kind of how we as human beings are. We're always looking for the fountain of youth. What's going to save me, propel me into better health, which is not a bad thing.
I can't imagine anything worse. Having to be around and your children saying, "Oh my, it's
they're
time.
Still here. Oh my gosh,
it's time." Make way.
That it's also like quality of life is obviously a key, and staying healthy for as long as one is alive is a very attractive path, right? So
a full and vibrant life is
life, absolutely. And I think the thing I may feel like I'm just pushing on this a lot, because I think it's so invisible to us how we're indoctrinated into a way of thinking that until we start to question it, we can't get out of it. And a mechanistic thought form kind of allows you to not think about other outcomes except the one you're pursuing. So if you're pursuing personal health and well-being and you're using krill oil or you're using fish oil, then you're not thinking about the wildlife that depends on the plentiful availability of those things that they depend on for their life. They can't go to the grocery store and pick up a bottle of krill. Those gigantic whales need to be able to have lots of krill to sustain them. And the same with fish. And people don't know we use these vacuum apparatuses that suck the fish out. It's really disrespectful. And I think that's something in our culture we've sort of lost sight of, what it means to have mutuality and respect. Like, all life is worthy of respect, from a blade of grass to a tree to a tiny shrimp to a microorganism in the soil. These things are equally valid as forms of life and deserve to have expression as life. And that may sound out there to some people, but I would say, how would you like it if some other life form showed up and started to diminish and devalue your life and to treat you as a commodity, as something to be extracted?
You've reminded me of a conversation I had with somebody a few years ago about she was buying fresh fish from the supermarket and said, "I just wish they wouldn't put the whole fish in the cabinet there with its eyes looking at me, because it reminds me that it was an animal. And I just want to see."
Oh, wow.
I want to see breaded fillets or something like that. And I said, well, when I was growing up, all of the butcher's shops had the whole animal hanging in the window.
That's right.
Everything, the head, the ear, and you could. And I do wonder whether, we are becoming too removed from the point of origin of our food. And
we are, without question.
If it desensitizes you, you can't have that level of respect or understanding for it. And I think it's quite good it's essential actually for us to understand that, no, this was an animal. And as you say, we should treat them respectfully. When we eat them, we should eat them respectfully and what have you. So it's a very good point.
It's sort of, coming back to, if there's an incredible book, which I highly recommend, Braiding Sweetgrass.
I've read it.
Oh, good. Robin Wall Kimmerer. It's a must read for anyone who is interested in how to have this reframe, how to relate to other life as having its own agency. Mm-hmm. We're very comfortable thinking of our personal agency, but do we expand to include what is needed for the livelihood of other life? And we, as you said just a moment ago, we're very desensitized, because it's all behind a lot of smoke and mirrors that kind of keep us from seeing the true apparatus that brings things to our table, that brings things to our realities without any of the consequence and outcomes being shared with us. So the dots are never or rarely are connected. And therefore, we don't even know to ask better questions about what is the outcome from my choice making and what does this have an effect on? And if I don't want to have that effect, what do I need to change?
Yeah, no, it's so true, so true. So as we think about sort of just wrapping up our call here today, Seleyn, if there's a message that you could leave with our audience that would be sort of like your take-home piece, because you really are a thought leader in this area, and I know people are going to be so interested in hearing your thoughts on this, and you're a big thinker, which is just great, a big picture thinker.
Thank you.
What would be your? No, it's true. It's absolutely true. Whenever we have our conversations, you have a way of seeing the big picture and certainly making me think more deeply about things. So what would be a closing thought for you, from you to our listeners, our viewers today?
Well, thank you for that acknowledgement. I really do appreciate it. I've worked hard to develop this kind of perspective. I natively have that kind of mind. So it's easy for me, and I know it's not easy for everyone. And so I like to sort of offer there's that old adage that kind of was, I think, instituted around in the 70s of think globally, act locally. And I think this is still extremely true today, and even more so. And I just like to encourage all of us to think about where we are on this incredible planet, and are we in a relationship to place that is about the health and well-being of our little place that we interact with, whether it be our backyard or it's pots on a balcony. But are we creating access to healthy things for other life beyond our own? Because like right outside my window, there's a hedge that's filled with birds. And if you walk my neighborhood, you get to my yard and you're suddenly struck by the amount of bird song. And I've had many people comment on what is that about? Well, I create a habitat in my yard to support these creatures year round. They have water to have access to, clean water. And I put out some food, and I don't use chemicals in my yard and grow a garden and think about what sustains life. If berries, things that grow berries that the birds can eat. Today, there were birds dive bombing my Virginia creeper, which has these little purple dried berries now that they eat during the winter. So to me, I would just say, think about how are you cultivating well-being and life around you? Because if we each took that on and did it to the best of our ability, we could restore a tremendous amount in a very short amount of time if we all made that effort.
I love it. Words of wisdom, as always. Thank you so much, Seleyn. That's a great note to finish on. And really appreciate you joining us today. And for our viewers and listeners that want to hear more of Seleyn's experiences and interviews that you've done with thought leaders in that area, you're the co-host of Regenerative Voices Elevating Stories, Activating Change. And we'll put up on the end of this a link that people can go to for that, because I know they'll find the interviews that you've done. I've listened in on the ones with the ranchers and the farmers and what have you. So it's very, very powerful. And thank you for the great work that you do in that space.
Well, thank you, Andrew. And you are one of those voices that people should listen to in our podcast. And I really value this opportunity to have a conversation with you. And I thank you and your team again for the work that you're doing and elevating the understanding of what this plant can offer us as an alternative to this other more extractive strategy of using other life to sustain our own. We can do better. And I thank you for leading that path with this particular type of health option of an omega-3 that's plant-based.
Thank you so much.